Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our second parenting webinar. I know many of you all have joined in for this hot topic, anger in children. Thank you for allowing us to be part of your lunch hour today. And anger, although it's just an emotion, just like any other emotion, it's okay to feel and experience it. However, we are here to talk about how to better manage it, not only with our children, but within ourselves as well. And we are going to be doing that with our panelists, whom I'll be introducing shortly. For those joining us, please feel free to state your questions in our Zoom Q&A function. You can even upvote a question if it relates to you. There will be a Q&A segment at the end of our session today. We have a team working very hard to synthesize these questions. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. We have with us here Dr. Kwa So Han. She's a Senior Assistant Director of Psychological Services at Community Psychology Hub. She is a mother to 2 young adults. We also have with us Mr. Bert Pei. He's a Schools and Community Engagement Manager at Centre for Fathering. He's also a father to 3 young adults. We also have with us Miss Gloria Ng. She's the Deputy Director and Head of Student Service at Singapore Children's Society. She currently oversees the Tinkle Friends Service, a helpline and chat line for primary school children, as well as Storm Riders, an anger management program for children. Myself, I'm Serene. I'm a mother to a 3-year-old, currently with the Advocacy Unit at Singapore Children's Society. So why this topic today? Actually, when we asked parents and caregivers on what topics they would want or like discussed during parenting webinars, today's topic emerged as one of the popular ones. Some of the reasons that the caregivers mentioned were they wanted to know how their children could calm down and regulate their emotions. They also wanted to learn how to keep their temper in check. And most importantly, they did not want to hurt anybody in the process of managing anger. So keeping these in mind, we will be attempting to cover triggers, strategies, and caregivers regulation in today's webinar. So without further ado, let's dive in. Anger. Sohan, maybe I'll ask you since you're next to me. What is anger and how does it look like in children versus teenagers?
Well, I think first thing I want to really put it out there is that anger is a healthy emotion. So a lot of times what we have like so-called issues with is what do we do about the anger? But if you think about it, anger is a normal reaction when, for example, our rights are violated, and it actually serves a very protective function. Yeah, and so in general, anger is from when an individual is blocked from having something that they would like. So in a child, it could be like a piece of chocolate that they would like to have, right? And then they try to reach out for it and they're blocked, in their brain, they're thinking like, oh, I want that chocolate. And because young children have less of the ability to kind of express themselves through language, then what we might see would be a lot of perhaps acting, so-called what we call acting out, like pushing or trying to grab, and maybe crying. Right. Of course, then for the teenager, something that they want their freedom. They maybe they want a particular maybe tattoo that the parent is not willing to say yes to. With teenagers, obviously with the brain development, things are a little bit more complex. They have more needs. So if that teenager already has, let's say, a lot of anxiety with peer acceptance, or they may be feeling a little bit depressed, sad about not doing well in school. All those will add to their perception I'm blocked. I'm blocked in getting so many things. And hence, the anger will be a little bit more complex. Teenagers are able to talk a bit more, so they might say you're not the boss of me, right? You stupid parent or you stupid caregiver. While at the same time, some of them might still resort to some physical means of expressing their anger. For example, like pushing and shoving.
Yeah, thank you, Sohan. I like that, you went really from mentioning it can be just wanting a piece of chocolate. And I also heard other emotions such as feeling sad, feeling like, hey, there's that feeling of unfairness. This reminds me about the anger cycle that, it starts from somewhere, and that's why there's the display, like what you mentioned, shouting and using certain words. Yeah, so maybe I can get Gloria to go through with us the anger cycle.
Sure, I can do that. So basically, when we think about the anger cycle, we're just trying to better appreciate what is happening when someone is upset. And so it often starts with an event. So something needs to happen first. So that's what we call like a trigger. And then what happens naturally is that a brain thinks about something. It's like, that's not fair. No, that's not what I want. Hey, that's not cool. That's not, so that's the way in which we have a thought that comes in. I try not to say whether it's negative or positive. It's really just a thought that comes in. Thereafter, the body will have a reaction. So that's when you feel something. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling worried. I'm feeling angry. And oftentimes I like to use kind of like anger iceberg, because what we see sometimes is anger, but underneath it could be something else. And beyond just the feelings, there's also that sense about the body is having a reaction as well. So some of the children that I work with, I could see their face getting flushed. Some of them, I see their fists being clenched. And then when I ask the children, what's happening in your body? They say, my heart is beating very fast. So those are very natural reactions that the body experiences. Then after that, what we talk about at the last stage is really either you react or you respond. But in order for you to do that, when we think about children, I like how Sohan was talking about how children and youth is a little different because their brain is constantly still developing. So for a younger child, there's some level of I'm not going to be able to make very rational decisions because my brain is still developing. So I'll just be thinking, grab that chocolate. But there's also a part of me, if I'm older, if child is older, they're thinking about, I don't think whether that's such a good idea, but I also really want to push the boundaries. Maybe I should just snatch the chocolate, or maybe I will not. So that's really that sense. And that is what I talk about, react or you respond to an incident. And why do we want to talk about the anger cycle? Is also because I'm not sure whether you have experience, but myself or even some of the parents I work with, when we see the children getting angry, they'll say why are you angry? Why are you upset? But if you think about the anger cycle, the first thing that happens is a trigger. Something happened. So what may be more helpful is really what happened. Because we're trying to tell the child that I see that something happened. Can I connect with you there first before I talk about what's happening?
Thank you, Gloria. I think you mentioned so many things, so many helpful things. I like the anger iceberg because it also shows that, I think emotions like sadness or unfairness, they may not be as loud, and that's why it has to be displayed as anger. So anger is on top. It's showcasing there, but actually underlying it, there can be many, many other things. And I think something that you mentioned about it's really the process. And talking about process, it can be quite an experience, right, to go through the process, because something you rightly mentioned, if you understand the process, you may then have the ability to respond. But if you are just dealing with the last stage of anger cycle, then you will really be reacting to it. So talking about experiences, what has been an epic meltdown that you guys have experienced with either a child or a teenager?
Epic meltdown. Wow. Maybe I'll share this one a bit. I think not just an epic meltdown. If it's only just an epic meltdown, then it'll be so much easier. But it's many and several. And then, of course, they are not very frequently. That may not be ideal. So if it's frequent, then you get a constant opportunity to practice how you respond. So we talk about response and reaction. We usually go down to reaction very, very quickly instead of just responding to the situation. And I realized that when all these meltdowns happen, I'm the one that need to self-regulate first before anything else, because I realized that the child has got some, like just now you mentioned, what's the problem or what's the issue and why are you getting angry, So how we put across the question is so important. So if I have my expectation that the child shouldn't be angry, I'll go why are you angry? And then from there, the child didn't get validated, right? You make him more angry or her more angry, and then you come back to you with something else, and then you will straight away go to the reaction mode instead of response mode. So I keep reminding myself, to realize that I need to regulate myself again and ask the child the correct question, like, is there anything wrong? Can I hear you out? And you give them that space. But of course, there are times when it's really bad. And then, like I always mention, safety first, de-escalate the situation. And after that, then you talk about what's the meltdown. Yeah. That's my personal experience.
I like that point. I could hear quite a few loud yups from Sohan here. I want to hear from you a little bit more.
I think I really want to pick up on Bert's point, right, about responding. So I know my children are now young adults, but I think growing up, they were my best teachers. I remember there was once my daughter was crying. She was really upset about something. She was actually angry about something at school. And here I was as a parent trying to already put on like the problem solving mode and you know, and I think like, you know, she looked at me and she said like, Mom, I just need a good cry, right? I need you to hug me and pat me, like, you know, and just be with me. And to me, it was a really humbling kind of like, you know, moment for me. Because of course, like, you know, I'm a clinical psychologist, so I should know. No, I'm just joking about it. Yeah, so to me, it was really helpful. And I remember one other occasion, I have to be fair, I have a son. Like my son came back and he ranted and he was really upset. And at that moment, I was also having a tough day at work. So I was really tired. And I started reacting. I said like, oh, you know, why are you getting... And then he just looked at me. But then if I don't talk to you, who do I talk to? So I learned, right? Like Bert say, like, you know, we have to calm ourselves down first and be a good listener. Right? Be a good listener. Allow them also the space to calm down. Right? Then we can have those conversations and problem solve and respond. Yeah.
Yes. I want to write on that point as well. So I've had a personal experience where my nephew had a meltdown in public. And when that happened, I know that it had passed the threshold for me to do anything more. I can't say, keep quiet. I can't say, like, stop it. I really just had to wait for that moment to pass. I just needed to hold his hand, make sure he doesn't run away. And in that whole process, a part of me had a lot of thoughts. That moment was like, when will this stop? How long more will it happen? And I'm also thinking about, why can't he know better? But he's only 4 years old at that point in time. And I think what I was also worried about was how people will perceive me as someone that's also taking care of a young person. Like, what would people be thinking? Am I a bad parent? Am I a bad caregiver? And what I really appreciated was there was once a man actually came up to me and said, do you need help? And I felt like, wow, that's so refreshing because I could feel a few eyes surrounding me and looking and watching. But what I experienced or perceived it to be was judgment. But when that man came over and said, do you need help? Even though I didn't need, I know that there was someone out there that cared for my experience and wanted to ensure that if I need help that's available. And I think that's, when we think about parenting journey, sometimes we don't always get it right. Or it's not about right. Sometimes it's that the child needs time or they need someone to co-regulate with them for them to calm down before we can have a conversation. And if sometimes we struggle with that, maybe having someone that can be an additional pair of hands, additional pair of eyes can also be very beneficial.
Yeah. I heard a lot of like support, you know, and just being compassionate. And I think something Sohan also mentioned, being open to listen to our children, what they are also trying to say. How do you all feel about, do you all think that should caregivers also look into what are some of the messages they may have received from their caregivers when they were younger expressing anger? And how does that kind of influence or impact the way they manage anger in their children now?
Maybe I can start the ball rolling. So my husband might be sneezing now, but like, you know, just within our household, you know, of the two of us, my husband comes from a more traditional background. So to him, I've had to have the conversation about like how having stronger emotional reactions is really part of like, a normal response. Like, because he tended to kind of like, oh, why are you crying? Why are you like upset? And so I think that's the part where, it's in our culture, right? Like, so even for myself, I think there are moments when, as much as I think I'm a forward-thinking, positive parenting kind of like advocate, there will be things from like, my childhood where, things have to be done a certain way. Right? We are like almost like, at least for myself growing up, I was drilled, right, in the school system, like, you need to have your 10-year series, gold standard answers. And that actually puts on a lot of pressure, even for myself as a parent, like how Gloria shared earlier on, right? I remember there were moments in public, let's say, where there are like, embarrassing moments where, and honestly, sometimes I'm thinking like, I hope nobody recognized me as a psychologist, right? So I think one of the things that I told myself when I became a parent is to remember I'm human too.
Yeah.
Right? And not to give myself that pressure, right? Because the irony is if I start thinking like, I am the psychologist, I should be the perfect parent, but where is that perfect parent? No. Parent is perfect. We all learn on the job, right? As Bert will also attest to. And then we have a younger mom here, will attest to. So I think it's really for myself is being aware of some of these growing up experiences and learning to chill, right? To sit back a bit and then say like, let's look at what can be done.
Yeah, I think knowing how we were cared for back then is so important. And that's why we also want to make a change now, because it's vastly different from what we see today. Like earlier on, I mentioned things like you don't sit down before the elders sit down, you don't eat before the elders eat, you don't talk unless you are spoken to. But it has changed. It has changed a lot. And it's good that we create a safe environment for our children to be able to open up, to share their emotions with us, but yet we also want to teach them some basic manners, some courtesy and respect as well. So reflecting on my own upbringing, I realized that there are certain things, like for example, we talk about anger. Same thing, the parents will go like, why are you angry? You're not supposed to be angry. It's like, oh yeah. Then you get more angry. And then eventually you don't even show your anger in front of them, you show your anger somewhere else, I don't want to mention what I did, but yes, sometimes if the child is showing anger in front of you, there's still chance for you to correct that situation. There's still connection with the child. And reflect on what's going on, what's the real need of the child. The anger is just a manifestation of a lot of unmet needs or wants, So we want to understand all this and then try to go down to the root and solve the problem. So first thing again is back to us. If we still stuck in our own world, the way that we grew up in, then we'll just tell them, shut up, move on. Life's not that difficult. I grew up that way. So I hear that very often today as well when I tell the parents, I grew up that way, The belt will come out, the hanger will come, whatever they can grab, and then you'll cower in one corner and they just whack you. I grew up that way. Why can't they grow up the same? It's different, dude. You gotta change, Otherwise, we want the best for them. So it's like you send them for all the enrichment and so on and so forth. But what about their emotional needs? That's all forgotten, That's very important.
You mentioned a lot of key words, like using really opportunity, like look at it as a learning lesson, take it as an opportunity. I think something that you also mentioned is also about knowing and reflecting. So it sounds like it really starts from within, and also wanting to make the change. Then that's the second step, right? Maybe at times, sometimes as parents, we know. And the second step is then really wanting to execute a change. And I think also, like both of you mentioned, there can be many, many other things that may have happened during our childhood, which may now be our buttons. So I think it's also important to know, like, when I often hear, when parents say, this one really knows how to push my buttons, But then I think to myself, like, I think it's also important to reflect why you have that particular button and where did it come from, what can you do about it also.
But I think I like the thing about the parents knowing that the child know how to push his or her button. At least you know which button is going to activate you, and you go and work on that button.
Yeah.
Prevent people from pushing it.
Yeah.
When you realize that, that's when you start to make a change. Otherwise, it's hard. You don't know why. Why suddenly you just from 0 to 10 and then you just explode.
Yeah.
Agree.
So now the parents know their own triggers.
Yes.
So they don't just know the children's
Yes.
trigger. They
Yes.
know their own trigger as
That's
well.
very important because end of the day, if the parents know their own trigger, they will help to negate or rather navigate with the child.
Yes.
The child's trigger. Because if you don't even know how your own trigger or what triggers you, and then you don't even know how to handle your own trigger, how are you going to handle the child's trigger?
So we are talking about parent and child, right? How about at times if there's another caregiver? Because everyone have their own different buttons. Yeah. How do we meet that alignment?
Anyone of you want to have a go at that? I do have a lot to talk about that. Yeah.
I think in the first place, like I suggested earlier, parenting is really on-the-job training, and it is a process.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress, right? So to me, it involves communication, and really and negotiation. So for me, it's ongoing. Just yesterday, I still had although my children are now young adults, we were still having negotiations between me and my husband on and really expressing what do we see, right? What are some of our take on some of the things that we're seeing in the parenting journey? I think so it's like how we always tell parents that you connect before you correct.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same actually with our other parent as well. We connect and then we collaborate, right?
Yes.
Because really research tells us that when caregivers are able to cooperate and collaborate and be consistent, that's when you have the best outcomes for the children. So
I think we have also spoken a little bit about strategies.
Yeah.
So I think we can delve a little further into strategies. So when we asked parents and caregivers for this parenting webinar, and they signed up and they actually shared their experiences in terms of managing their child's outburst, many of them mentioned strategies such as giving their child space and time, comforting their child by hugging them, and they themselves also remaining calm. Yet, keeping their child calm at that given moment was one of their most significant challenge, one of their biggest challenge, despite using all those strategies and methods. What do you think is missing?
I think one of the things that we probably need to grow our muscle in is that patience. Because it's also that sense of an escalating anger doesn't de-escalate within seconds and minutes. It can take as long as 45 minutes to an hour, and that is backed up by science. So if we're talking about that, it would feel like I'm trying to deep breathe with my child and it's not working because it has only been a minute. So maybe I'll give an example. So for my team, we run a program with children, really teaching our children how to manage their angers in safe ways. Not because we think they have a problem, but really because everyone will benefit from learning how to manage their angers in safe way. And one of the things that I think sometimes the stakeholders that I work with could be schools, could be parents, they wonder how come when the children come from the program and it's the first session and they wonder how come the children are not learning how to manage their anger in safe ways already. And it takes time. So sometimes for an outsider, when they look at our program with no context, they would think like, I have no idea how to manage a class and the group work because there's a child that look like he's getting angry, another child that's flaring up. But the thing is that we need to be consistent. So one of the things is we recognize that it takes time. Two is that it requires that consistency as well. So today, as I'm teaching the child, recognizing your trigger, when we recognize those like early warning signs, what are some things that we can do before it escalates even further? And the first week, the second week, the child is, nope, I'm still going to go from 0 to 10. But the third week, the child, I'm still saying, I recognize and I see that your face is getting flushed. I see that your fists are clenched. I'm thinking that you're about 5 and 6 and you're getting pretty upset. Okay, what are some things that we can do? And at the third week, the child is like, I can verbalize and I say, I'm getting frustrated. Great. But that's progress. But it doesn't happen overnight. And that is when I think we really need parents to maybe appreciate that when the child is learning a new habit or new skill, it takes time. And it requires that patience from the caregiver, but also the patience from the child as well. Because sometimes the child also thinks that I should be able to regulate myself better. I should be able to calm down immediately, but I'm not. So that also creates a lot of frustration for the child as well. Yeah.
I hear the word patience, right, from both. I think, hearing process and patience really highlights how much of it is really, really a journey, right? And I think you mentioned timeline 45 minutes, and not always it can be in varying times, right? And I think those are things that are very importantly mentioned. Do you think these are things that will require prep work? So like first incident that happens, for example, and it may take a certain time, this thing didn't work out. And how can we go back and review this incident and do some prep work around it? How important is that?
Very important. So I, in my career, I've done quite a bit of like parenting programs, and one of the first things that we encourage parents to have is to have a routine. Yeah, so a lot of times, patience and has got to do with also whether in that context we are time pressured or we think we needed to rush to a certain things, right? So there's this concept of preparing for high risk situations. For example, for young children, if I have a 3-year-old, for example, whom I know is going to be very enthralled by the candies, by the toys, displayed at the shops, then perhaps I will need to manage that first, right? Set up a routine or preempt it by telling the toddler, let's say that we're going to go in and have a look, and then 5 minutes. And actually, one thing that many parents don't realize, and I'm going to share the secret now, okay, there's the magic of using the timer. And better still, if you let the young child, and it works, I think so far it's worked for any child who's primary 2 or below, right? You give them your your phone or any timing device and get them to set the time, so 5 minutes, we're going to go into the shop and look for 5 minutes. Here, you press the button. Okay, that actually will reduce the likelihood of then later on them say 5 minutes more, because it's very clear, they know. And at the same time, those are the early lessons in self-control, right? We're empowering them to then set the limits and for them to follow through. And that actually can reduce, hopefully, the necessity to have anger outbursts later on. Yeah.
I use the timer thing for my son at times for playground time. At times.
I love that it's so empowering and collaborative, because it's not something that a parent is doing to a child, but it's that sense about, it's a partnership. You have a part to play. I'm setting that limit, which parents want to do and should do as well. But I'm also giving the child that sense of fun as well, because I think sometimes when children always think that, I have to do A, B, C, D, that's the step. But yet, if I can also inject a bit of fun, being able to press the timer, all the children love that. They want to be like, I want to be able to touch your phone or fit off your phone. Those are things in which when children are involved, I think there's higher likelihood of a buy-in. There's a higher likelihood of wanting to not see this as a task, but see this as just something that we do as a family.
And how it can be equal, and also moving away from the fixing mindset to the guiding mindset of, I think, because something like Sohan mentioned later on can also work out to a little bit of self-discipline, control. Yeah.
I think I caught on the word collaboration, which I always like to use, regardless of the child's age. I always say, as long as the child can speak and react,
Yes.
it's time to collaborate with them. Like for example, you set the time, and then after that they will press the button and they watch the time themselves. So at any point in time, you can collaborate with the child. You want to set boundaries within the household. Same thing, invite them to come in
Yep.
with your spouse, sit down, or the caregiver sit down, and we create the boundaries
Yes.
together. And then we review the boundaries
Yes.
however frequently
Yep.
each family requires, and get them in again, whether it's workable. Do you think coming back at 10 is okay for you? I see that you have been returning like 10:30. You know, work on that again, and then they'll give you the reasons, and whatever reasons they give you, if it's valid, validate them, and then say, okay, then maybe we can shift a little bit more here and there. You know, and I also hear validation when the child is angry. Going up without validating their anger, I think you make them more angry. Yeah, by understanding why they are angry, is so much better for them to start the process of regulation. Yeah.
I think we heard quite a bit about attending to them and their feelings at the moment, right? But we also recognize that some behaviors do need correcting. So at the moment, it's also not recommended to correct there and then, because instead of co-regulating, we might be co-escalating, right? So when do we correct?
Ooh, it's a tricky one.
Okay. For you want to go ahead
You
first?
go ahead first.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so for me, it's again from experience. Not at the moment when everything is cooking, you know. So let the things simmer down, maybe cool down. However long it may take, and seize the opportunity to come back and bring the topic up again. And that's when everybody can have a better frame of mind to talk about it.
Yeah.
Even for very young kids, it's the same. Yeah, and then if you have teenagers or young adults, same thing. It's how it is. Even like adults, among adults, you know, with your colleagues, with your friends, you don't go ahead head on
Yep.
during the heated moment. You chill first. After that, when everybody's ready, and we start talking. I think it applies to any age, to anybody. Yeah. So that's how I would want to do it as so. Yeah.
Yeah, agree. So I think ultimately, right, if we think about it, it doesn't help if we are very heated. It means like, for those of us who are familiar with brain science, like, the brain is in its like survival, emotional kind of mode. And naturally, actually, then the thinking centers, the executive part of the brain will actually not be working very well. So ultimately, the giving time to cool down is helping us to then get into that problem-solving space that Bert actually was trying to suggest, right? And so the idea is then finding those teaching moments, right? The moments where we can calmly talk about like, hey, what happened, right? What can we do differently the next time? Yeah, and then try out I think what Bert was also sharing is like after that discussion, then we can try out some of the strategies that come out of that problem-solving types of discussion. Yeah.
It's very interesting also.
Yeah.
You realize that during this discussion, the adults themselves realize there are so many things to learn too. And that's the best part actually, because then you realize, oh, this is seriously a journey, and it's not just your journey and your co-caregiver journey.
No.
Yeah.
It's the family journey. We
Yeah, it
really
is.
journey together. So we even have this talk about family journey. It's all together. It's not just the parents or the caregivers trying to bring up the children. No, we journey together. And I think that's what it is for. That's what family is for at the end of it. It's not like, oh, once they are adult, get out, go.
No.
Not in that manner.
So beautiful, but it reminds me of an analogy. Like if there's a storm and you are just putting your fist up like that in a storm, it's not going to do anything, but you got to really settle, close the windows at that moment, and it will pass, right? Storms pass. Yeah, so can this be put into practice every day? So why I ask is, I have a 3-year-old, right? So exactly, I wait for him to calm down, attend to his feelings. And then at times I'm thinking to myself, I have so many other things to do today. I'm I have to remember to address this with him. And what then I figured was that, hey, I'm just going to dedicate a time before bedtime to do this. Like, what do you think happened today that you were not happy with? And it will then remind me also of certain events that may happen in the day, you know, after reading our book. And then that is the time where I feel he's also a little bit more open to listening, because everyone's using a very calm tone and we're just discussing about what may have happened and how to better do this the next day. Yeah.
I think for younger children, it's also that sense is remember that emotion regulation is a skill. So when we think about skill, it's not something that's innate. I mean, you have temperament and all, but then there's also that sense about I need to learn and I need to pick it up. So if I consider that as, you know how children, they learn math, they learn science, it's something that they learn. Emotion regulation is also something that I think parents or adults, caregivers can also support in building those skills in our children as well. So what do I mean by that? Earlier on, you talk about how sometimes you forget, right? Then to me, it's also, then maybe that thing wasn't as significant. You know, we don't always have to address every single thing. Don't hold yourself up over those things. But if you're noticing a pattern, so for example, you know, I'm noticing like, okay, I didn't manage to address it last night before bedtime, but I'm noticing a pattern that just before meal time, you know, my child's getting upset. Then probably you don't have to address there and then all the time, but it could be something that, hey, I'm noticing a pattern. Let's talk about that. It could also be a situation of, let's not talk about that directly, because there are some children, they know you. They're like, I know what you're trying to get at. You're going to talk about my behavior at dinner time. You're going to talk about how I didn't behave. Those are the thoughts that's going to come in. But what if we could use books? We can use stories. We could use like, hey, I have a friend, you know, what do you think? How do you think, you know, we could... my friend was telling me about this, her child, she was having this problem. What do you think we could do? Because sometimes children, when they know that they're being singled out, they think that you are talking about me. I will shut down, or I will tell you the right answer, or I will try not to engage too much because I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm feeling a bit bad about myself, and we don't want shame to come in. We really want that sense about, let's problem solve, let's build this skill together. What are the things that this person could have done differently? Do you think you could have used that different in some situations as well? That would be a good time. Yeah. So then I think you're creating and facilitating a space for learning to happen.
Yeah. I think using stories is wonderful. How about, you know, I think we spoke about different parenting styles, or there may be other caregivers involved. How to reach that kind of alignment with the other caregivers to ensure that certain strategies may be applied consistently?
Alignment is something that I'm always for. And it's never easy to align, you know. So really get the caregivers together, sit down, respectfully talk about the differences, and as much as you can align, be consistent. It's never easy. And of course, these strategies will change as the child grows as well. So change accordingly. And don't be stuck. You know, right now the kid is already teenager. You don't apply the same thing to a 3-year-old to a teenager, right? So this has to be revisited as frequent as you need to. If you see that it doesn't work, have to come back. So alignment is definitely. I'm always very, very happy when I speak to some parents and then they tell me alignment. And I'm even more happy when I hear it from the dads themselves. They said, oh, the couple have to align, you know. Otherwise, seriously, the child, they are very, very clever in a way to manipulate the parents. That's, everybody know that. But if you're aligned, there's no room for them to do that, you know. So, again, people talk about good cop, bad cop. That's not something that we want to go into. That's the worst scenario that you can do for the children that you are caregiving, because they will go towards the good cops and then ask for things that they need to get done. So it's always alignment. And then the parents will not to say win the battle. We don't want to win the battle. We have a family environment that is more welcoming for everybody, caregiver as well as the receiver as well.
So to add on to what Bert said, right? I think what I find helpful would be to, like, you know, one to have focus on one thing that they would like to change, and also then look at like what is one skill that they would like to build in the child, rather than like stopping. It's always harder to stop a behavior, like stop the anger outburst, but then to like maybe have the conversation of like having like one useful thing for the child to learn, and then the parents can support around that. So that might be a way in as well. Yeah.
Okay, so as caregivers and adults, we have been talking quite a bit on our adult perspective. We did ask children and teenagers on our Instagram handle, what is the one thing you wish your parents will do or understand when you are angry? So this is what they have got to say: give me space, offer help when I need, reach out, talk to me. Any similarities, or are you surprised with anything that they mentioned?
Not surprised at all. I would like to go back and ask them, do I get all ticks for this?
I'm sure we'll get full marks on this.
It's okay. If I don't, then I have opportunities to correct myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Although I don't want to, as I was looking at the comments, I realized that, it's like give me space, but also offer help, which sometimes can feel very contradictory from a child's perspective, because it's like, I want you to be with me, but at the same time, I want you to give me space as well. Why am I highlighting that? Is sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm with you. I know you're very upset, and I'll give you some time. No, but I want you to tell me what I should do. So that's the response that sometimes children give me. And I think that can sometimes cause a bit of confusion for adults as well, because they are thinking that I'm giving you space, but you are thinking that, but that's not what you want and that's not what you need. And I think that is when sometimes it goes back to that sense of collaboration as well. How can I help my child that I want to be able to give you space, and I also want to offer you that help? What will make the most sense for you? What will be most helpful for you? And in families where there are also siblings, what work for one sibling may not work for another sibling as well.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's a lot about customization, but it's also about collaboration with the child about what works for you. Some children really want to be hugged and they want to be attended to. They want to feel that sense of physical touch. But there's some children that's like, leave me alone first. Let me regulate by myself, and then I'm going to come back. And I think there is no right answer, but basically it highlights that every child is going to look quite different. There are some things that is quite consistent. They want some level of space, but they also want a non-judgmental environment, and they also want help when they actually ask for it as well, and to receive that help and not feel dismissed or rejected. So I think that is when it's a dance that adults would have to do with the children. Why am I so highlighting that is that earlier on, both of you all were talking about how there needs to be a lot of alignment. In some of the families that I've worked with, I've also heard about how some parents say that, but the child has never behaved in this manner before. It's only when they go to maybe grandparents' house, or maybe in school, the child behaves in a certain manner, but at home, I've never seen that behavior. So then it creates that sense about, what do you mean by this alignment? It's completely different lived experience that I'm seeing as well. So that is when we also want parents to consider not dismiss another adult's or caregiver's experience, is that it could be valid. But what is the goal that we're working towards then? We all want these children to be able to manage their anger in a safe way. We want these children to know that even if they get angry, they are still cared for, they are still loved. What would that then look like? So if we can be focused on that common goal, then maybe that's helpful, rather than to say, no, there must be something that you're doing, that's why the child is behaving that manner, because you're doing in that setting, where it need not be, maybe, I'm not so sure, but when we pinpoint that is what you do or not do that is causing that, it doesn't create that kind of helpful environment for the child, actually.
Yeah, it's just a fit at the different environment. So a little bit more about caregivers regulation, right? Very last question, like how do you learn how to manage your anger over time and somehow kind of meet it together with your other caregivers' management style?
Okay, for me, sleep is most important. Our promotion board did not pay me to say this, but the science is very clear. Sleep, like regardless of our ages, right, is very important. It allows the brain to actually have enough energy to stay in the problem-solving space, to pay attention, and and if you think about keeping calm, that's actually an executive skill, right? It's self-control, it's in the problem-solving space. Yeah.
Actually, basic needs does influence quite a bit.
So I agree with the sleep therapy. So and those teenagers who are listening right now, when your parents ask you to go to bed, please go to bed, because seriously, that will affect your mood and your learning abilities. And it's going to give your parents a very hard time when you are in a bad mood, because I spoke to parents. They said, no, my child just refused to go to bed, and then next day groggy and grouchy, no mood for anything, only got mood to quarrel. Yeah, so sleep is very important. So yes, for me, sleep is one, but I would choose something else like me time, go out on nature walk, absorb the energy from nature. Yep. That's my way of managing. But again, sleep is important too, if I don't get enough.
And now, when should parents consider having professional help in managing their child's anger?
I think if I could answer those two questions concurrently, I think it's that sense about, I'm not sure whether some of you have experienced pain before, like headache, toothache. When you're in pain, you're definitely not in a good mood. But I think the other thing we also want to consider, what if I have a psychological ache? I'm feeling pain, I'm feeling a level of distress in my heart, I'm not able to eat well, I'm not able to sleep well. Those are the signs that tell me that I'm having a pain, but it's something that no one can see. It's not a wound. And if that is the thing that is actually causing a child to be more irritable, be a lot angrier, and it's for a prolonged period of time in a few settings that we are seeing across board, I think those are indicators that tell us that maybe a chat with a professional could help. And when I say a chat with a professional, I'm not always saying we have to see a psychologist as well, because I think there's also that sense of, with no offense to you, is that there's this sense of like, oh, it must be very serious, it has to be escalated to that level. But it's that sense about a professional who works closely with children, who have seen a wide spectrum of children, will be able to tell you, this is generally quite developmentally age appropriate. However, there are certain nuances maybe you could consider and try. It's a bit like if my washing machine breaks down, I'm going to tell my friend it broke down, but she's going to tell me, oh, maybe try this, open the thing, or don't know what, so open screwdriver for certain compartment, but it's not going to be great advice, but it'll be, it's a bit helpful. But when something is broken or something is injured, something is hurting, maybe I need to speak to someone else that has a good experience in that area to share with me, is there something else I could do differently?
Thank you. Very quickly, now we have some questions that are coming in. Okay, first one. What are some effective de-escalation techniques that parents can use in the heat of the moment? Can you also recommend daily practices that can help children to build emotional regulation skills over time?
So maybe I will take a stab at that first. Actually, what I found really helpful as a professional and as a parent is deep breathing. So early on, we talked about how, children and adults need space, right, and time for the brain to calm down, for the anger to calm down. And one of the, scientifically actually already proven ways is to have deep breathing, where, and when you have deep breaths, the brain will actually reset. There's a particular nerve that helps, right, to calm things down. Yeah, so I'm going to link that to the second, question. So what would be a good daily practice, especially for parents with very young children, you can start having some of these exercises. Sometimes for really young children, it involves maybe even putting a tissue in front of them and getting them to blow. Right, on the tissue, and with time, then it becomes almost like second nature, then it becomes easier for them. Yeah.
Thank you. That's Sohan.
For de-escalation, okay, as usual, my way will be remove from the situation.
Yeah.
That's the very first thing. Whatever situation, there may be things that they don't like to see, things they don't like to hear, or maybe the temperature is just not right, or maybe some people that they don't like around them. And then for practice, age appropriate, like children, yes, blow on the tissue paper, but I think teenagers, you ask them to blow on teeth, that may not work. So for practicing, I would say, for teenagers would be like when they are in a normal mood, you just ask them, how do you feel, that kind of stuff. And what would you do if you are not feeling right and going to get angry?
Yep.
What would you do? Let them process it themselves and come up with a solution themselves. And they own it and they can practice it themselves during the times that they are not agitated. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will not I will just add on to whatever they have highlighted. Sometimes when we remove children from a bit worrying situations where they may hurt themselves, someone may get hurt in that process, I think definitely we want to ensure safety. But thereafter, it's also that sense of I can remove a child from that place and that situation or that person, but they're still thinking about what has happened. So they are constantly thinking about that. I want to be able to interrupt that. So what I may add on top of the deep breathing is also like grounding exercise as well. And I find for younger children, when we ask them to engage their senses, that is one way. The other way that is a bit easier, maybe for teens, it's okay, just count how many squares are there can you see? How many circles do you see in this space that you're in? Because what we're trying to do is we want to interrupt that thought first. We want you to know that you are not in that unsafe place. You are safe here now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything that can be carried on for daily practices. So another question is recommending daily practices that can help children to build emotional regulation skills over time. I know you guys mentioned a few, right? The breathing and grounding exercises.
Perhaps I can share further. So I think children, actually one of the effective ways to get children to learn is through adult modeling. Right? So that's why we have this famous saying, if you want regulated children, you need regulated adults, right? So I think one of part of emotion regulation skills is, for example, identifying. Like earlier on, we also talked about, if we're able to identify the buttons or the triggers, and that actually also can involve identifying the body sensations or the feelings, using the emotion words. So I think that's something that you actually can use, teaching opportunities. For example, if we look at a teenager and you say, wow, you look like you need a listening ear, you look upset and you look like you need a listening ear. I mean, that's actually a way for them to pick out yes, I am actually feeling quite upset. And then that's one way to build. So really, if rather than daily practices, I would say look for opportunities, right? To be able to model, to collaborate with them, to identify their emotions.
Yeah.
And every time when they're successful in regulating their emotions or co-regulating with us, that's that will build that skill, over time. Yeah.
I'm always for role modeling. Really, that's what I tell parents all the time. No teaching is better than role modeling, because like I mentioned also, whenever you see your child acting or reacting to a certain situation, you will most likely see yourself or your spouse or the other caregivers manifesting through that child. So I think the best daily practice that you can give to the child would be your own practice. How you manage stressful situation, how you manage or regulate your own emotions, and whatever said, emotions are important to have. Anger is one of the emotions, but it needs to be regulated. It needs to be, in a sense, controlled too. So how do you do that yourself? And with that, you can teach the child a very powerful message when you do role modeling. Yeah.
I think not only role modeling self-regulation, also about being honest when, as a parent, you make a mistake, apologize. I think that is also something it models to them that, hey, it's okay to make a mistake, but to just have the awareness to then just be human.
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. There's another one. What do I do if a child does not want to talk to me or appears helpless? Example, I don't want to walk during a meltdown. Why do they behave this way?
First, I need to attend to the parent first, because it is very hurting when one, your child feels like they're rejecting you, and two is because there's so much love and care towards the child, that feels as though it's a rejection of their love and care as well. And I think I want to, whoever asked that question, I think I want to acknowledge those feelings first. Thereafter is also that sense of, I've worked with some children who have chosen not to talk to me. So we can have a very good relationship in a few sessions, and then that one session, they're upset. And one of the things I've tried is I label the feelings that they could be experiencing, and I'm making good guesses at this point in time. I'm guessing that you're pretty upset now. I'm guessing that something happened before you came in. And today, how you want to express yourself is to not talk. And I can imagine that that's your way of wanting to get control again. And I'm here to listen. So I want to be able to acknowledge the child's experience, no judgment. My role and my responsibility towards you remains consistent. You can activate it in your time, in your own space as well. So those are some of the things that I would do. Sometimes a child, because we also operate like the children's helpline, some of the things that children have shared is that I tried to talk or I don't even know what to say. So it's not a situation of they didn't want to, but it's hard to talk, especially in some of the households where talking about their feelings, talking about what exactly happened, is not something that's common. Some of the families I work with, what do they talk about is, have you had your dinner? Have you had your lunch? What do you do in school today? Have you done your homework? That's the conversation that they have in the family. So now to talk about some of the friendship issues I'm experiencing, some of the stresses I'm experiencing with certain teachers in school, is going to be new language that the child has to develop as well. So sometimes it's asking the child, would you prefer to use a different medium? Would you like to draw? Would you like to just write? Pretend we are chatting, but we're using paper and pen. You know, you can just type you can write a few things, or would you prefer, I know some children and youth have phone, we prefer we text about this as well. Because what we're creating is channels for children or youth to be able to have communication. Because communication, not always happen here and now, face to face. It can also happen in different mediums as well.
Yeah. To add on, I think so whenever what we call meltdown is really like the fight, flight, or freeze kind of like responses from the brain. And I think early on we already kind of suggested that those things need time to calm down. So for some of the situations, right, and the thing is a lot of times we associate that with fighting or really like aggression kind of like behaviors, but part of the behavior could be also withdrawing and not moving. So it will be very much like what Gloria has shared, and there are times we might need to kind of like be there, like Bert says as well, and almost like channel the calmness first, right? And and then when there's a chance to then give them a choice. So do you want to do this or do you want to do that? How about we wait for another 5 minutes, then we walk together, or what would you like to do? Like, you want me to hold your hand? But that probably needs to be only offered after they have calmed down a little bit. Yeah.
Actually, very much of what Gloria and you mentioned is a lot of co-solutioning.
Yeah.
Right, really like doing it together and the whole partnership.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have a last one. It is very stressful when we are in a rush for time. Example, sent to school before work. It's impossible to wait for him to take time to calm down and talk to him. What can we do?
Does this happen very often? if it's very often, then there must be a reason why he's behaving this way. Maybe he doesn't want to go to school because there may be some things in school that, he just, or it could happen on a particular day, maybe certain subjects or whichever. So maybe get down to the root of it. Yeah, maybe for that one day, okay, don't go to school. Let's say even the parents don't go to work and try to find out what's the real issue behind, if it happens too often.
So I talk about routines, right? So part of it is also about where it's possible and feasible to relook at how we plan the day and preparing, because each child will have a different response to transition. So sometimes it could be children are struggling with the transition from one setting to another setting or one activity to another activity. So on days when, maybe weekends when things are calm, we might, if it's a young child, we might want to like have a conversation with them, right? Have play with dolls or something and problem solve with them, right? And I mean, there are many other strategies that we probably could explore. So I would actually highly recommend that, you know, whoever asks this question, right, to look out for parenting programs. I didn't get paid for this commercial, but that, like, you know, but really it is helpful where you can see, you can have more strategies, like even setting it up in a way that the child will like earn, like, you know, perhaps like points, you know, and that will teach them also further about problem solving and like behavior control. But those things need longer time to set up. Yeah.
I mean, I could just add one more thing, which is that maybe we also want to give children choices as well in that whole process. So it's like, yes, we know we're in a rush for time, but actually what children want sometimes is that power or that sense of control as well. And sometimes why they may be responding in those manner is also because there is that loss in that. So if we could also consider, all right, we definitely, the end goal is I need to go to work, you need to go to school. Then what are some choices that I can give to the child? Would you prefer that I wait for you in the car, or would you prefer for me to actually hold your hand and we go to the car together? Both choices to end up to going to the car, but at the same time, we're saying that I'm giving you a sense of choice. Yeah, so that's something you may want to consider.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have come to the end of our webinar, but before we leave, any quick words of encouragement?
Breathe, keep calm, keep connecting and communicating.
Continue to be the good role models, and then yes, your children and you are going through this journey together and growing together. Yes.
Gloria?
I guess it's really consistency and compassion towards your child and yourself.
And mine is try, fail, succeed. Thank you, everyone. Please fill in the feedback form if you have any questions, or if you need to speak to anyone. There will be follow-up activities. Look out for more parenting webinars that are coming up. In August, we do have a lecture on a parenting topic. So please look out our website, Singapore Children's Society. Have a good week ahead, everyone. Take care. Bye.